Well, hello there, kindred spirits. I am so glad that you came back to see me today. Now, this is going to be a very relaxing video because I'm going to tell you a quick little story and then I'm going to read to you an old nursery rhyme from an old book that belonged to me when I was just a little girl. This is Thumbelina. And Thumbelina is the story that I'm going to tell you about tonight. I want to tell you about this little doll first, though. Some of you know that my children were all three home educated from kindergarten to college. And one of the methods of homeschooling that we used was called the Waldorf method. And it has a heavy emphasis on play and the natural world. And so years ago, I got involved in a little Waldorf craft making group where we would make Waldorf inspired crafts and then exchange them. So over the years, I collected so many beautiful needle felted items and beeswax items and little dolls like this one. And this one was just so special to me because it was made from a friend from Brazil. And I've always loved the story of Thumbelina, and then this little doll being sent to us was just extra special. So anyway, I wanted to show that to you, but now let's move on to the story. So today we're going to be reading from a book of fairy tales, and it says Dean down here. The illustrations in this book are wonderful. Now this book, my mother wrote in here, it says Lindy and Cam Mayberry, 1978. That was the year that she gave this to us for Christmas. But the illustrations throughout, there's a picture of Rumpelstiltskin, three little pigs, Goldilocks. It's just a marvelously illustrated book, and I've never seen another book like it. It says it was illustrated by Janet and Anne Graham Johnstone. And this is, it says Dean's A Book of Fairy Tales, 1977 edition. But let's read the story of Thumbelina tonight. Once upon a time, there was a young woman who longed for a tiny child, but she wished in vain. She went to an old witch woman and told her, "I have the greatest longing to have a little child of my own. Please help me." "Ah, if you want your dream to come true," said the sorceress, "take this grain of barley. It's not the kind the peasant sows in his field or the sort you feed to the chickens. Sow it in a flower pot, tend it, and see what happens." "Oh, many thanks," cried the young woman, and she gave the old witch a silver shilling. When she got home, the woman planted the barley corn, and immediately a big flower grew up. It was like a tulip, and it was red and yellow petals were tightly closed. "It's a lovely flower," exclaimed the woman, and she kissed its petals gently. As she did this, there was a loud crack, and the bud burst right open. And in the center of the flower, on a little green pyramid, sat the tiniest, prettiest little girl. She was no bigger than your thumb, and for that reason, she was called Thumbelina. Thumbelina was given a varnished walnut shell to sleep in, with a mattress of violet petals and a charming rose petal quilt. One night, as the little girl lay sleeping, an ugly old toad came up and took Thumbelina in the walnut shell and carried it off to the stream that flowed through the garden. The old toad lived here in the mud with her son. Oh, how ugly and stupid he was! "Croak, croak, brocature, croak," he croaked, staring at the pretty little damsel as she slept. He was too silly to say more. "Hush, you will wake her," said his mother to the toad. "She will be your wife, so let us get to the stateroom's mud ready for your wedding." The old toad put Thumbelina in her little bed on a huge green water lily leaf. "Now she cannot run away from us," she croaked. Poor little Thumbelina woke early in the morning and wept bitterly to find herself all alone in such a strange place. Thumbelina hated the thought of marrying the young toad. Some little fishes took pity on her and nibbled through the stem of the water lily leaf. They thought her far too pretty to marry the foolish toad. Thumbelina sailed down the stream, and a little butterfly helped her by pulling her leaf boat, harnessed with her blue sash. Look at that illustration. She's down underneath the ground with a little mouse and a little vole. Isn't that beautiful? All summer, Thumbelina lived in the countryside and was happy, but in the winter she was hungry and cold. At last she was given shelter by a kind old field mouse who fed her with corn and let her stay in the snug mouse house under the cornfield. But the mouse wished her to marry a dull, blind old mole who lived next door and was very rich. "He has a beautiful black velvet suit and a very large house," squeaked the mouse. One evening the mole took them along the passage into his house. There lay a beautiful swallow. It seemed to be dead. Thumbelina was so sorry for the pretty bird. Later she slipped away and came to the swallow. She warmed it and covered it with her own quilt. Suddenly she felt his heart beating under the soft, downy feathers. All winter she nursed the beautiful swallow. How sad she was when it flew away. She was to marry the mole soon, and the thought made her very unhappy. On the day of her wedding, Thumbelina went sadly out to the field to say goodbye to the sun, for as the mole's wife, she would have to live underground. "Farewell, son, farewell," she cried in despair. "Greet the dear swallow if you see him." Coo-eet, coo-eet. There was a fluttering of wings, and there was a swallow swooping around her. The swallow easily persuaded Thumbelina to leave the cold and fly with him to the warm, sunny countries. Thumbelina lay among the soft feathers on the swallow's back. Away they flew over forests, lakes, and mountains. At last they reached the warm lands. The skies were blue, and lemons and melons grew in groves. Children chased large butterflies. The swallow flew on to a blue lake. There stood a half-ruined palace of white marble. The walls were covered with a flowery creeper full of swallows' nests. On the ground among the fallen columns twined some large white flowers. Sitting in the most magnificent flower was a handsome little mannequin. He wore a brilliant gold crown on his shoulders, and he had bright, delicate wings. The little prince was delighted when he saw Thumbelina. He thought her quite the loveliest maiden he had ever seen. He took his golden crown and placed it on her head, and he begged her to be his queen and ride with him over the flower spirits and rule with him over the flower spirits. Then all the flower fairies came with gifts. The finest present was a little pair of wings. The swallow sang Thumbelina his most beautiful song. Then he flew back to Denmark, where he had a little nest by the window of a man who writes stories for children. "Quit, quit, quit," he sang to the writer, and from him we learned the whole story. The end. What'd you think about that? This book is full of wonderful old nursery rhymes, old nursery stories, I should say. So if you want to hear more of these, you let me know. I'd be happy to do it for you. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a good sleep, my friend.